31 stab wounds.
What was it?
Ice pick.
I'd like to speak to Miss Catherine Trammell, please.
Is she a suspect?
She's a suspect.
I wanted to write a book about the murder of a retired rock and roll star.
You know how she does the boyfriend? With an ice pick.
She intended the book to be her alibi.
I picked him up, and I had sex with him.
You didn't feel anything for him, you just had sex with him for your book.
In the beginning. Then I got to like what he did for me.
You like playing games, don't you?
It's nice.
You've got no physical evidence.
She's lying. What's your new book about?
A detective. He falls for the wrong woman.
What happens?
She kills him.
Stay away from her. You are out of control, Curran.
You won't learn anything I don't want you to know.
She knew I'd say she did it, and she knew that nobody would buy it.
She is screwing with your head, Nick.
She knows things about me that I only told you.
How's it feel to kill someone?
You tell me.
I think you got too close to the flame. I think you liked it. You're in over your head.
She seduces people.
It was internal affairs, wasn't it?
She manipulates people.
Freeze! How much did she pay you? You wanna play it? Come on! She knows where I live and breathe.
Games are over, Nick.
So Basic Instinct.
Basic Instinct, 1992. A violent police detective investigates a brutal murder that might involve a manipulative and seductive novelist. Directed by Paul Verhoeven of Total Recall and RoboCop and Starship Troopers. A Dutch man. Very famous for being kind of eccentric and weird.
And we talked about
And
it
also
in
smart.
the last movie also. A bit.
It's his movie too. I think we might have done Starship Troopers on here at one point.
Yeah, so we've done quite a bit. What else have we missed from him? I feel like we could...
We could do RoboCop.
Okay, yeah, it's a good movie.
Let's take a look at his filmography real quick.
That's got to be his biggest one. But yeah, I'd also be interested to see
A lot
the
of these
filmography.
I don't even know. There's like way more than I thought there was. Oh, Showgirls, obviously. I've never seen Showgirls, but I knew that one.
Okay.
Hollow Man, Black Book, Tricked Ellie, Vendetta. I don't know what any of those last few were.
Huh.
And then there's like a bunch in the like pre-RoboCop. RoboCop is like the breakout thing for him. Clearly, it's like the biggest thing on this list.
I love that movie. I put it on a while back and was just amazed at how bloody it is. But not
All of his
surprising when
movies-
you consider the rest of the movies.
Yeah, all of his movies are like that. I think that at one point I thought I had seen enough of his movies and I saw RoboCop enough times. It's one of the main movies that I associate with just ultra violence in the 80s. Like he specifically has like a lot of super gory violent stuff in his movies, and he's not alone in that in the 80s, but he certainly has his own flavor of it. Mm-hmm. But when I would watch RoboCop as a kid, I'm like, this is just what the movies are in the 80s. And as I'm watching it in like the late 90s. So what I think that you were talking about Basic Instinct. What brought you to watch it?
It was why did we want to watch it? It's because it came up on The Sopranos. I think Christopher was watching it in his apartment.
That's right. You had said that he was trying to watch the chair scene.
They were just like on the chair scene, yeah. Wasn't clear if he had even seen. Is that like part of the joke that like the rest of the movie isn't very salacious, and it's kind of like a, I don't know, not like the most exciting movie in the world. It's kind of slow and it's got like vibes throughout. So I don't know if like the crowd. I don't know if the crowd that shows up for the chair scene is exactly the audience for the rest of the movie. So I don't know if part of the joke is that you're just looking at the chair scene.
I would bet that is the case. I would bet that most people's experience with this movie is like, if someone had it on VHS, was literally just fast forwarding to that scene, trying to pause it at the right moment, and then that's it. Like, there's no point in watching the rest of the movie, which isn't entirely true because it is like, I mean, it's a pretty raunchy movie the rest of the way, and it's Sharon Stone. I think that if you're a young man in the 90s when this came out, 92, you're a straight young man. You're heavily interested in the rest of this movie for sure. But
not that Michael Douglas is not bringing it also, because that guy is this is like some of the youngest, leanest, handsomest Michael Douglas that I've seen.
Yeah. He's so unlikable.
Yeah.
I think that he's kind of great in this movie because, you know, it's like a noir movie. At least that's
Very
what,
much so.
that's what it,
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Almost too much.
And the gumshoe, like, grizzled detective character is really played to a T with this guy. All of the unlikable qualities of the noir detective from like older movies is just like cranked up to 11 in this guy. Like, he's unlikable, addictive, abusive, like self-deprecating to like the worst degree. He's just like the worst. He's not really someone that you're rooting for in the movie, I think.
I agree. I mean, isn't the whole thing that he kind of becomes like the Sharon Stone character by the end? Like, they do this thing like where he starts saying lines that she said earlier in the movie, and he kind of like they start becoming each other in a way.
Yeah. I know. I want to talk about that because I think you could take it a few ways, because he certainly starts to become the character in the book, or he was the character in the book the whole time. Like, while I was watching it does a clear thing where it connects his character with the character in the book. It doesn't like hide that at all, where another movie might. And I don't know, when I was watching it, I was getting this sense that like Sharon Stone was this like supernatural kind of character that could like, I don't know, manifest reality by writing it down. Yeah. Or she's like a god of some kind, which I
just
think
like that
is
Will
fun.
Ferrell movie.
Oh yeah, it's exactly
Stranger
like
Than Fiction.
That's right. It's exactly what that movie is.
Yeah, but that makes sense if that was like literally true in this case, because Michael Douglas's character, it just like seems like a character out of a crime novel from the 50s or 60s or something.
He's an archetype.
It doesn't have a lot of like personality to him, really.
Let me ask you this question, if we're gonna dive into this fun little conspiracy theory right away. Do you think that the world, unlike Stranger Than Fiction, that the world that Michael Douglas lives in is purely like of Sharon Stone's construction, or does she, like the Stranger Than Fiction author, have the ability to just manipulate his world, like that she's just controlling him as a puppet essentially, or is she just like God and she's like living in her own little novel world and doing stuff in it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the world is real, but I think that Michael Douglas's character like feels to me like just a novel character come to realization in the real world.
So she seems real, but he doesn't.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
Because like
I feel like we need to contextualize the plot a little more.
Oh yeah, sure.
That Michael Douglas is a detective. That's established in San Francisco, just talking about California movies. This takes place in your neighborhood. There's an inciting incident of a rich dude who gets murdered by an anonymous blonde. That's like, you see that the woman has blonde hair, and she ties him up on the bed, BDSM style, and then kills him with an ice pick in his bed.
Gruesome.
Michael Douglas gets gruesome. Lots of blood. I think that, don't they show like the ice pick like going into like his eye or something?
Yeah.
Hardcore. I don't think we can review the movie on the podcast visually because we'll just our video get taken down right away. But some anonymous blonde kills him. It's clear from the beginning that Sharon Stone is a person of interest, but also her lesbian lover is a person of interest, kind of a doppelganger to
also
her,
blonde.
which we can talk about. Because that seems like that's, not a coincidence. And then, like the regular noir pattern, it follows, or Michael Douglas starts to fall for Sharon Stone, who is an author who writes crime novels. And her crime novels have, I think it's established in the character that her crime novels have this historic ability to sort of mirror like real world events. that she's involved with. And as Michael Douglas gets closer and closer to what the truth is, several more people die, and Sharon Stone seems to be somehow connected to all of it. What's her character's name? But the movie ultimately ends kind of ambiguous as to who the actual murderer was, but you can draw your own conclusions.
Right. I read some stuff that was straight up saying that the ending, that like, definitively that it was her by the end, but I remember reading the ending
That's what
as being
Wikipedia
ambiguous.
says.
Yeah.
Wikipedia says that according to the plot, Sharon Stone is the killer.
Because
like
at the
the-
end she has an ice pick. I'm like, okay, well if that's
Right.
gonna be like that's not gonna hold up in court.
I'm with you though, because I read that
Yeah.
and I was like, I don't know if it's that cut and dry. I mean, it's nice to read that on a Wikipedia page and feel like you have some sense of clarity, but I ultimately don't believe that.
Yeah.
Or at least like she may be the killer, but I'm not using that final shot as the damning evidence.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So to contextualize for the listener, trying to be better about that, whoever you are,
Hi.
her lesbian lover dies, a girlfriend dies, seemingly all the suspects are dead, and I think that they actually they set it up to where Michael Douglas's ex-girlfriend or current girlfriend or ex-wife or something, who has her own kind of twists and turns in the plot. The movie sort of presents you with like sort of an absurd amount of damning evidence, which I think is by itself suspicious. That she has to be the killer, his ex-wife, and then you're like, okay, that's the killer, case closed. And then Michael Douglas and Sharon Stone are free to continue their sexual relationship. And right at the end, the camera tilts down to the side of the bed where there is an ice pick. And she made this motion toward it just moments before. So the movie teases you that maybe she is the killer.
The conversation leading up to that final scene was funny. Like Michael Douglas, like throwing out the idea of doing the traditional marriage kids thing with her.
What does she say?
She's just like, I don't like that. Like, I don't like kids or something. And that's like the moment where she, I think, like reaches to the side of her bed or something. And then Michael Douglas is like, well, that's fine. I don't care. Whatever floats your boat. And then she's like, okay, and is happy again. So like the implication was, I think, that if he
didn't kill him because he agreed with her or something,
or if he would have continued to push the kids thing, that she would have murdered him right then and there. I mean, I have a topic for discussion. I really like the Michael Douglas character and his backstory coming into the movie. Of evidently he was involved in a shooting where he fired his gun and I think accidentally hit a civilian. I don't remember if they died or not.
Yeah, he killed several tourists.
Several?
Several.
How the fuck did that happen?
I don't know if the movie ever explains it, but like it's clearly like a cloud that follows Michael Douglas personally, but also professionally. Like everybody is sort of kind of waiting to take his gun and badge away again because he's kind of proven himself to be a liability because of that incident.
Like he has to do, there are scenes where he's talking to this therapist, psychologist, whatever, at the police department, and this is also the girlfriend, the ex-girlfriend, that's important to the plot.
Which is fun because they don't reveal that right away. He at first is just talking to her as a shrink, and then he says something about like when we used to be together, when we used to date or something.
But he has this cloud hanging over him, and like it may be, the implication is that like he may be a hot-headed, potentially bloodthirsty cop with no morals. And as the movie progresses and like crazy stuff starts happening because of Sharon Stone, presumably, she sets him up and makes these situations up that incriminate him further. So she makes it seem like, just one example, the guy's boss gets killed, just shot, straight up murder. And this happened right after he got in a big fight with his boss at the office and like punched him or something and got thrown out of the office. So obviously people think that he's doing it. And so throughout the movie, this character is just like getting his reputation just trashed for these reasons, and you see him slowly kind of separate from the department. I mean, I think for half of the movie he's not even working as a cop. Like, I think he gets how do you say, discharged or
put on leave or
put
something.
on leave, and he's just like a rogue agent. I like that.
Yeah, it's you said bloodthirsty. There's like quite a bit of dialogue between him and Sharon Stone where like the movie sort of teases out that Sharon Stone, I'm just going to keep saying Sharon Stone, I'm not even going to try, that her other novels represent, like, there's at least one other one that tells like the story of like the death of her parents. Where she like killed the parents like in the novel, but like it's apparently generally accepted that it's just a novelization, that like her parents' death had nothing to do with that. But you know, the movie makes it pretty clear that like maybe she did, like it's suspiciously similar.
Right.
And she talks to Michael Douglas a lot about killing, like the feeling of killing. Talks about, you know, there are people who have killed and there are people who haven't, and like it changes you fundamentally. That there's two types of people in the world, like killers and not. She seems to like think about the world as like a prey and predator sort of relationship. And I think that she uses the shooting incident from his past to make that connection, to find like a level of camaraderie with him, where she like, because if you accept the fact that she did kill her parents and she likes killing people and that she gets some sort of basic instinct satisfaction out of it, that she relates to Michael Douglas in this way and is trying to sort of coax that similar sort of bloodthirstiness out of him. Like she wants him to like it, like she likes it. And you can kind of get a sense that he starts to sort of become that way. Like he doesn't, when they have those conversations, he doesn't automatically just reject that idea. No, I'm not like a bloodthirsty cop. He doesn't say that. You can see that he like considers it. He considers the way that he feels about killing someone.
Yeah, he's very complicit in like what she brings out of him. He wants it, and it's kind of tied up with like him wanting her sexually. Yeah, but at the same time, he's also becoming more violent and more hot-headed throughout the movie.
It all seems kind of connected. Like the title of the movie is Basic Instinct. We're animals. What do animals do? They survive and procreate. They kill. So it seems like Sharon Stone's character has this like philosophy, has a similar philosophy to that, like about the world, how like people are just animals and like you're foolish if you don't embrace the parts of you that are an animal.
Is the basic instinct the sex drive or the murder drive? That's the question. Yeah,
could be either. Could be both.
Could be both. Sharon Stone thinks it's both. But there's 3 books that Sharon Stone's character wrote that have like real life parallels. There's the one with the parents, which is the most believable, that it's just a novelization of real world events. You know, makes sense. The second one was something about her professor. Remember, she had like that professor at Berkeley who died. And then the third is the more relevant one. I think it was a separate novel, but yeah, the Ice Pick.
Is it not the one that she's working on right now?
I don't think so.
Or is she working on the 4th one?
I think she's working on the 4th one that involves Michael Douglas.
Okay.
And it kind of like a funny thing is that, you know, it's this novel that she's working on with a character, Michael Douglas, that's in the book. And they're kind of like teasing that it's a question of like, do the real world events influence the novel, or is the novel kind of like influencing the real world? So that at some point in the movie, they're like, well, we don't know how this book ends. Right. And at a certain point in the movie, she says like, I finished the book, which is interesting, right? Because it's like, oh, what did you write? You know, Stranger Than Fiction style. She kind of becomes like a cleric, like a clairvoyant, just like setting the events that are to follow.
There's like a scene where you see her printing the book. She said she finished it and she's printing it at her home. It's funny because she's like a rich person, so it's like implied that only like rich people have those like dot matrix like printers like in their house. You know those like types of printers, the one that make that really like awful sound and everything comes out on one page that you can
with
like
the perforated edges. Yeah.
she's printing that, and there's like a close-up shot of one of the lines, and it says like, the detective finds his partner like murdered in an elevator, and that's like a direct prediction for what happens next.
Oh,
like,
no way, that was written?
It was written down, and it happens before the whole sequence where the partner goes into the apartment and is killed.
Wow, I missed that.
And so you could interpret that a couple ways. You know, it could be that she's like clairvoyant. Could be that she's some sort of stranger than fiction god that can just create reality by writing it, or she's the murderer. She wrote it that way, and that she later just orchestrated the murder exactly as she wrote it down.
Mm-hmm. In that beginning scene, did you think that was Sharon Stone to begin with?
I knew that I was being manipulated, so I thought maybe, but I knew that like not showing her face, and that it's most likely going to be like a noir opening murder scene. That like it was purposely like, you know, her face was hidden and it was ambiguous.
Okay.
So.
I totally misjudged. I just thought it was Sharon Stone. So like later on when the doppelganger girlfriend shows up, the only thing that happened is that I got confused and I thought she was Sharon Stone. Like that's all that, which is not an interesting movie experience that I had.
Yeah.
It was just dumb. So from the beginning, I'm like, oh, Sharon Stone killed that guy. And then it took me a long time to back away from that and be like, oh, no, actually, that's still an open question.
You were like, case is cracked. Like, I got it figured out. I'm not even 5 minutes into this movie. That's really funny.
It turns out it is Sharon Stone playing that scene.
Oh, the actual person on camera is Sharon Stone. You read that?
Yeah.
Well, of course it is. I mean, the main problem with this movie, I think, is that it spends quite a lot of time gawking at Sharon Stone's physical body, which I'm pretty sure was something that Verhoeven like pressured her into with this and possibly the other movie that she's in, Total Recall.
Oh yeah, is that something that's written about?
Somewhere, I remember reading that somewhere. That doesn't surprise me at all if it is true. I think that this movie is not a. I think it loses points for that, like critically and among most people who have seen it. That like for the same reason we were discussing at the beginning that like most young men were probably interested in this movie. That it's probably why it's not liked by many others.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely sure that like he knew he was making a hyper-sexual movie, and he knew like that he was creating this kind of spectacle. I mean, I don't know what he did in the terms of the production of the movie or how he handled the nudity or whatnot. I heard somewhere that, and I don't know if you read this also, but that the scene with the leg crossing was something that Sharon Stone did more so for the purpose of like throwing off the other actors. You know, of just like, forget the film, just her and the other people in the room with her, like a way of her kind of method acting and actually trying to like sexually hypnotize them or something.
Yeah.
For the sake of the scene, as opposed to something that was, I don't know. Is this ringing a bell? What I'm talking about?
Kind of. I remember hearing something like this. That memory feels a lot older than what I just said, which was, I think that scene specifically is where I've read that Verhoeven like pressured her into doing something like that, versus it being on her own volition. Maybe a little bit of truth to both. Who knows?
Like I think maybe the pressure could be, and this is just conjecture, of like Verhoeven being like, oh, we're gonna use that. That's gonna be kind of like a big part of the movie. That's gonna be the part that like everybody talks about and like looks at. And whereas like maybe she wasn't so comfortable with so much focus being put on that and so prominently displayed, because you know you can cut around. You don't have to be such explicit in the way you present the shot in the final cut, so I can see how like somebody wouldn't like that.
Yeah, who knows?
Are you surprised that this movie was so like controversial and generated so much buzz at the time?
Honestly, I'm not super aware of the controversy around it, other than what we were just talking about with Sharon Stone.
I mean, I'm just vaguely aware, but just the fact that it was such a spectacle because of how sexually explicit it was.
It's extremely. I mean, I'm not surprised by that at all. It's
Really? I am
no.
surprised. Which part is super sexually explicit? I mean, there are sex scenes in the movie.
I mean, they're pretty explicit sex scenes as far as sex scenes go.
I mean, I see skin.
In like I mean, there's like, I feel like you are like inches away from seeing like full penetration in one of them, at least one of them, if not more. It just leaves like very little to the imagination. It's basically like softcore porn, which I think, especially at the time, like that was pretty insane. And
I mean, that's what I think it is. I think that movies back then weren't so sexually explicit, but since then things have become so much more sexually explicit.
Oh yeah.
What I'm getting at is that it kind of like was underwhelming to me.
Well, I mean, certainly by today's standards, it's not a sexual spectacle like at all. But I definitely watched it. I watched it in the context of a 1992 viewer who's like seeing, and also like Sharon Stone is, you know, I think regarded as like one of the hottest people alive. So that like added to the billableness of that spectacle. But yeah, I think it's just for the time, it's insane, and it's still pretty intense for any time, but it definitely like falls by the wayside for modern movies and everything you have access to on the internet nowadays. But
wait, what do you mean?
I don't know. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Is there porn on the internet?
What?
I think that's a joke from Family Guy. Quagmire's like, wait, there's porn on the internet? And then like the next scene, he has like the very buff forearm. That
sounds like a Family Guy joke. I have a story about when I used to work at the movie theater. Do you remember the movie Funny People? It's like...
Oh, yeah. Apatow, Judd.
Yeah, and Adam Sandler is in it. And I think Seth Rogen?
Yeah. It's
like kind of a somber Adam Sandler movie, as far as Sandler movies go. And there was a matinee showing of it, and an older couple, like in their, I don't know, 60s maybe, went and saw it. And they came out maybe halfway through. And there's some explicit sex scenes in that movie. I mean, honestly, that movie is more tame than this movie, Basic Instinct. And in the movie theater, that old couple came out halfway through and were incredibly mad. They were yelling at me, like just a regular employee, and demanding their money back, and then saying that movie should be rated X, which is reserved for porn. And it's just like an insane response, like to think about, like just that a low-level employee has any sort of like say in any of that.
Did you refund them?
I think I did. Yeah.
Is that fair? Is that a fair call?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately like kind of a low-risk thing. If people are doing that in droves, that can be a problem. I think that we had a protocol back then too, where we would just give people like vouchers, and I either did that or gave them a refund. I'm not sure, but
I bet they walked out during the scene that like Adam Sandler's having sex and the person's asking him to do like dolphin sounds, like in the movie.
That's exactly the scene I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the context of the movie, isn't he's like a movie star where his like most famous role is he's like some sort of dolphin hybrid superhero like guy. Yeah.
He basically plays himself.
But anyways, that was Funny People.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you about Basic Instinct. The psychologist ex-wife character, she strikes me as like kind of suspicious. I think that
from the get-go?
Yes, because there's that whole revelation at the end where they actually knew each other, like Sharon Stone and the psychologist girlfriend knew each other at Berkeley, and she was not upfront about that at first. And I think that she knew who Sharon Stone was the whole time, but never said anything about it. And I'm pretty sure that came up, and she had some sort of justification for it. But regardless, it's sort of like a loose excuse. It seemed like that's something that you should just say right up front in an ongoing investigation about somebody. And then there was the name change. She said that she got married and that she took the guy who she married's like last name, but her first name also changed because the guy that she married just called her a different name. That's what she said. That's why she changed her first name. But that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, why, when you got married, why would you just be like, I'm just also going to change my first name because this person like calls me this nickname. And then she also changed her hair, which, you know, is not illegal to do, but does seem weird considering everything else. And then she's very conveniently like in the apartment building when his partner dies. But, you know, that could be the movie manipulating me too. But I just wanted to talk about her.
Yeah. At that point in the movie, they're trying to convince the viewer that Sharon Stone is really innocent and that it's the psychologist ex-girlfriend who was behind everything. Around that point, you learn that they knew each other, that they went to Berkeley around the same time, and then you learn that the therapist person was like obsessed with Sharon Stone, like a stalker. Allegedly. And so it's building this case against her being the guilty party. Which I don't know. It depends like on whether you think that, because like we said, we're not considering that the ending is unambiguous. We think it's ambiguous. So the verdict is still out. That therapist person could be the culprit behind most of the shenanigans going on in the movie, or not. I mean, I don't know.
Or not.
But yeah, suspicious as hell.
It's funny because even after she dies, she's not absolved of suspicion, because, you know, he shoots her by mistake. He thought she was going for a gun, and then he shoots her because she was going after her keys. Sweet keychain, by the way. It's like a little Bart Simpson keychain. Remember that?
No.
Oh, it's sick, dude. And I mean, you see it earlier in the movie. It's like Chekhov's Simpsons keychain.
That's a common TV trope. I thought you were pulling a gun out of your pocket, but it's just something else device.
Yeah, there's like montages of tropes like that on YouTube, which are really fun to watch sometimes, where it's like I think I saw one once that it's like every time in a movie when someone says, "What are you gonna do? Shoot me?" and then that person gets shot.
Why?
But you see it earlier in the movie too, so it's not like that comes out of nowhere, because that's a pretty like striking like gag to see, as far as just pulling keys out of a pocket.
Yeah.
So they do establish it earlier, but you know, right after this, when they like go into her apartment and dig up all the stuff of the I think like magazines or newspaper clippings of Sharon Stone's character and her being obsessed with various things or people. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's basically like they stumble upon like the Unabomber like mother lode of evidence, completely like damning the psychologist girlfriend person. And I find that the amount and the quality of the evidence was like in itself suspicious. It seems like it's too much. Like it seems like it's too much evidence, and like doesn't really seem to fit that character. But I don't know. It seems like it's something that I could easily believe that it was like planted and she was like framed top to bottom. Yeah. I believe that Sharon Stone's character is crazy enough to have gone to those lengths to frame that person.
I agree. I think that that's deliberate on the movie's part of, they make you think it's the ex-girlfriend, and then when she like dies, when she gets shot, there's just like a series of evidence that comes out that like the thing she was wearing that got like stolen or whatever. There's just like a series of hints that came out that made it seem like it was pretty conclusive that it was her, but too convenient.
Hi, Goose. Sorry, my dog came down to visit me.
Ooh.
I'm here by myself, so it's just me and her. Do you want to say hi?
Bring her up.
Come here.
Wow. Hey.
Say hi, Goose.
Hey, girl.
Say hi.
It's your girl.
Yeah, she's a girl.
Hey, girl.
You hear that?
Who's a good girl? Who's a good girl? Put your headphones on her.
She doesn't super like being held. Even though she's pretty small and like easy to hold. Any scene or character in the movie that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
The partner getting killed was super gruesome in the elevator.
I mean, is it like as gruesome as the murder we see at the beginning?
I think just about, yeah. I'm looking at it now. I'm at 152, although I'm not quite there yet. But it's just there's something about the ice pick stabbing that is so, just gets to me.
Let's see.
Because it's all penetration. There's no cutting. There's no blade.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably no mistake. I mean, with how sexually charged the movie is, that it's the way that you kill someone is more of a stabbing, phallic sort of weapon.
And I guess what really gets it about me getting stabbed by an ice pick is that it's the least amount of damage that a stabbing utensil can do. And so you need to just get stabbed repeatedly. Like ever hear like prison stabbing stories, and it seems like the number of stabs is sometimes ridiculously large.
Yeah.
Stabbed 40 times, and you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, it almost, I mean, I'm totally out of my depth here, but it almost seems like getting stabbed is worse than getting shot. Because, you get shot somewhere, it's usually once, because one gunshot will take you down.
Yeah.
And then you're either like dead pretty quick, or, they can fix you or whatever.
Right, right.
But a stab, it's like the attack is prolonged. Like you keep getting attacked because the one stab will not do anything to you, theoretically.
Yeah, I'm definitely way more scared of getting stabbed and shot.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there.
Also, there's a separation with a person wielding a gun against you.
Mm-hmm.
While you're being stabbed, it's like very personal. I mean, they're like right up in your grill, so to speak. And you're struggling with them.
Yeah,
And maybe you're trying to like get their arm or something, but
you're fighting back.
Ugh.
Yeah. Oh, I missed this. There's like some evidence in the girlfriend's apartment that's like straight up a photo of Sharon Stone and the psychologist right next to each other in their graduating class. But yeah, it's like a cropped photo where they're literally standing right next to each other in like the graduate lineup.
So regardless of who the killer is it do you think it's established that the therapist lady was a stalker of Sharon Stone?
Well,
like that could be true, and Sharon Stone is still the killer, I think.
It could be. I had never really thought about it that way. I always kind of thought whoever is the stalker is also the killer. Because Sharon Stone or like one of them is confronted with that evidence. They're like, so-and-so said you were a stalker. And I think it's the girlfriend who says like, no, she was the stalker. They like immediately turn it back around on whoever the accuser was. So it really doesn't, I didn't think about that too much because it didn't seem like there was any conclusive evidence as to which of them was doing the stalking.
That's a great example of the movie, like that like keeps fucking with you, the viewer. Like they have like one scene where the therapist is stalking Michael Douglas, and she's like, "Oh no, Sharon Stone is crazy!" Like she's making all this up, and it's like very convincing. Like you're convinced as the audience, and then Michael Douglas goes to talk to Sharon Stone, and Sharon Stone is like, "Ugh, she told you I did this," and then she like completely convinces you the other way, and then you don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah. It's totally like what Total Recall does. We were talking about last time.
Yeah.
And the same guy, so makes sense. Starship Troopers is like similar in that way too. A lot of ambiguity. But yeah, both this and Total Recall, it's a lot of whiplash on what you believe. And both movies, by the end, you're still like, I'm not really sure, like what to believe. Which somehow it does it in like a fun way. And on this movie, to a lesser degree, at least with Total Recall, it sort of makes you want to watch it again for Total Recall, I think that that's partially just because Arnold is in it, and it's like a fun action movie. This movie is really like horny and has a lot of explicit scenes in it, so that's a reason to revisit it, I guess. But yeah, it does. This movie doesn't have a lot of like draw for me to watch it again.
No, I don't even want to watch it a second time because I don't think it's gonna. Well, I think it'd probably be interesting enough, but I don't think I'm gonna get anything too new from it.
Yeah, it does. It's not like so draped in mystery that it begs a second viewing, and I don't know. I don't even think that if the second viewing did like reveal a lot of stuff that I would find it all that interesting. I think I got a lot of like the main clues like the first time around, and I don't know. Frankly, I'm just not really interested in like who the killer is.
Yeah. Overall, I thought the movie was fun, but fine.
Yeah. Here's a good example. Like Total Recall, I've seen that movie like a dozen times. I still don't know what's going on. I have a pretty good idea of like what I want to be going on or how I choose to believe what's going on. But ultimately it's like not sure. And I still go back and watch it for that reason. This movie does not have the same effect on me. Like, I don't know what's going on at the end of Total Recall, and it makes me want to watch it again. I don't know what's going on at the end of Basic Instinct, but I don't care. And I won't be back.
Like, the basic plot of the whodunit, I didn't really find all that compelling. But that being said, I did enjoy the movie. Does that make sense? But just not for, like, the main plot, like, through line.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it, too.
Like once I realized that it was just jerking me around about like, oh, is it her or is it not? And I'm like, does it matter?
Right. Exactly.
And decided the answer was no, and I watched the rest of the movie.
Yeah, that's the correct answer. The answer to the whodunit is it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. I think the best scene is like the chair scene when she's being interrogated.
Why is that?
I think it's just like with her effect on all of the men that are interrogating her. You know, the using like her sexual energy to flabbergast everybody. I think that was like a good example of that.
Of her just ability to do that.
Yeah.
Like
a little bit of that was hinted at when they first interacted with her. She's like on her porch with the really nice ocean view. Yeah. And they're trying to question her. And they were like, oh, were you in a relationship with this man? And she's like, we fucked. And they're like, oh my. Yeah. You know, they're all kind of like taken aback. And then they picked the partner guy, like this kind of like very like middle America dude.
What's his face from Seinfeld?
No, not Newman. His partner that got like killed in the elevator.
Yeah.
But no, Newman was also very funny in that scene. Like I think he did a fantastic job of playing how uncomfortable he was with it. I enjoyed his face. Because
isn't his character in that scene, he's like a real kind of straight Boy Scout, like law enforcement type.
I liked when she was smoking and they were like, oh, you can't smoke in here. And she was just like, I don't care. And like nobody could. They're like, we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like those scenes. And then the rest of it kind of dragged. I mean, there was good scenes here and there. I'll tell you one thing that I really didn't like. What's musical score. I
can't even really remember much about it.
It's just like orchestral, lots of like stringed instruments and orchestra. Just didn't like it. Like I just actively did not like it.
Didn't really stand out to me.
Like I was just rewatched the last scene, like the very last shot when it's a fake out. You think she's gonna stab him in the bed. But it's not. It's just accompanied by like very swelling, very loud music. Terrible. It's where he says the line, "We'll like screw like minks, raise rugrats, lived happily ever after." That's the line from that.
The term rugrats stood out to me. It just seems like a funny way to refer to kids. It seems like exactly what the type of those two people, how they would refer to kids. Almost like a nuisance. Like it's just like a box to check. Like we'll just do that. We'll just get some kids. Like no aspirations of being like parents or what that means. They're just like, this is just a thing that people do.
Famously, the title for a children's television cartoon
I think, to people of a certain age, it means the TV show, and then people older than that age, it means just kids. It means kids if you're like a piece of shit,
I don't think it must have not been associated with pieces of shits if it's like it was so common that a TV show would be named after it. It must have been like what
Maybe.
wife beater is now. Like if you look at the words, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But people just say it flippantly.
Yeah.
Rug rats.
I feel, I don't know, I'm still not super comfortable saying wife beater, talking about tank tops. And I feel like that might be more recent. I feel like I used to say it in high school, and now I'm like, that's a tank top.
Sure,
I don't say that word anymore. Oh, this is interesting. We didn't talk about this personnel. What do you make of the tertiary character who's like the old woman that Sharon Stone hangs out with, who is like a convicted murderer?
Oh yeah.
I can't remember her name, but she like drives to her house in her Ferrari. Sharon Stone drives her Ferrari to that woman's house several times, and you later learn that she's like a convicted murderer, and she killed her husband or her parents or something.
Yeah. Something
and you
like
don't
that.
really learn much more about her. She's just kind of in a few scenes and like only has like a handful of lines, but her presence means something. Like the movie like is very clear to like point it out that she is who she is, and whenever she's around. So
yeah.
the
function to me, well, I thought the function was to tip off to the audience that Sharon Stone just has a weird kind of death obsession, which helps her, which is in the column of her being innocent. So it's like at that point I thought it was making the argument of trying to explain maybe why she's been acting the way that she's been acting, and while still being innocent, is that she's just very weird and loves this death stuff and associates with people that are killers and finds it fascinating.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why she's getting a kick of pretending to be, or being coy about whether or not she's the murderer, because like she actually would enjoy that.
Yeah, that's good
If
evidence.
she's innocent, she enjoys the dance she's doing with the police. Like she likes making them think that she might be the murderer. Gets her off.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, that like her obsession with death is actually like points towards innocence, potentially. She's almost like living vicariously through real murderers in that way. Wow, this is actually like, this idea is giving me a new idea that she might very well be innocent. Hear me out here. Michael Douglas is a murderer. That's a fact. The old woman that she hangs out with is a murderer. That's a fact. The psychologist's girlfriend, who she may or may not be obsessed with, could potentially be a murderer. And so she is strictly like living vicariously through real murderers. Like maybe she was obsessed with the psychologist's girlfriend because she knew that she was crazy, or maybe the psychologist girl was obsessed with her and she reciprocated in some way because she found that interesting and fascinating. And she's kind of like a murder like poser, right? She's going to like the murder parties, but she herself is not part of the club, but she desperately wants to be, and that's why she's writing about it so much. And the very end, when she almost kills Michael Douglas, that's kind of her like almost going through with it for the first time. Where she's like, I'm gonna join the club that I so desperately love and want to be a part of. But like right at the end, she chickens out because she is, at the end of the day, just a normal, innocent person.
Civilian.
Yeah.
Which is why I think if she's innocent, it makes complete sense that she has like an ice pick next to her bed and has like murder fantasies. She's
right.
like, she looks at it and she's like, oh, I could use that, Don't test me, LOL.
Right. Yeah, her attitude could be easily interpreted as suspicious or just a weird person.
Yeah. Well, anyways.
What would you how would you rate your experience watching this movie, and then the movie itself.
I think I've covered it pretty well up to this point. Don't have anything really new to add. This is a famous movie. It's got a big reputation. I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed seeing it firsthand, what it had to deliver. I thought it was engaging, definitely sexy in a good way, but ultimately it just wasn't really my kind of movie, I'd say.
Yeah, and so you would give it a
7 out of 10.
7 out of 10.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. I think
just
7
a
out
safe
of
score.
Yeah, I think 7 out of 10 is pretty safe. I had a similar sort of reaction, and I want to be clear. I went into this movie with a pretty open mind. I was like, I'm gonna watch this movie for what it is and have no bias against it. But I came out of it feeling just kind of mediocre. I think that I generally really like noir stuff. This is a neo-noir thing, and I think for me at least, noir, like the reason that I like it is just the aesthetic of it. You know, like the classic noir stuff, like black and white, hard-boiled detective with the name on his door, Inspector Gumshoe, all that. But this movie, and I don't know, I definitely like other neo-noir stuff, but just as a counterexample, so like Blade Runner is a neo-noir movie, but that movie is also like a fucking sci-fi movie about cyborgs and robots and stuff, and it's a very cool like cyberpunk world. So that movie, it just gets by on that alone, even if you paid no attention to the noir stuff. But it just enhances it. It makes it a fucking cool movie for both reasons. This movie doesn't really have like an ace for me. It's just like doing sort of a neo-noir thing, and its ace is that it's really sexy. There's a lot of sexy stuff going on in it, and I just don't care about that.
I do wish that it did more.
Yeah.
That it swung harder. Like after like a good while of watching the movie, I became kind of disappointed, where I was like expecting more from it, and I came to the realization that
you weren't going to get
the scope of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 as well. I think that's about the exact right score. 7 out of 10 ice picks, I guess. Oh, last scene I wanted to talk to you about. Remember when he's at the square dance cowboy bar with his partner?
Yeah.
Michael Douglas. He's not dressed up, but his partner is. And right after that scene, his partner like drives home, and I don't know if this is just this movie or just the time or Verhoeven, but like he gets in his car completely shit-faced, the partner, and drives away. A complete like drunk driver liability. And I don't know, like watching that in like 2023, I'm like, that's so dangerous and so irresponsible. Why would he let his friend leave? But I don't know, maybe it's just in 1992 drunk driving was more normal, and you just let people do that. No big deal. Does that stand out to you at all?
I mean, yeah, I definitely noticed it. No qualms at all. Like there was no moment,
no hesitation from any party.
Anybody. Yeah.
But I've heard that. I think that we're at the age where we grew up in a post like drunk driving is like insanely irresponsible world. People would come to our schools, and show us like horrible graphic videos about drunk driving. But I think in 1992 and certainly the 80s, from what pop culture and just older people have shown me, it just wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, people just drove drunk. That was normal.
I'm watching the scene now as he's getting into the car, and he really is like, he's rambunctious. He's like clearly very drunk.
Completely drunk. Yeah. That's why it stood out to me so much, because even now, there's like a gray area when people drink. They're like, oh yeah, I've had a few drinks, but I'm like okay to drive. Like you see that. It's not a binary thing like the anti-drunk driving ads would like it to be or want you to believe. But this is clearly a case, like by any standards, I would think, but maybe not, where you would be like, this, you probably shouldn't drive.
Well, if I could just like come up with some justifications that like might come out of the mouth of the partner. You know, you could say something like, you know, it's so late right now, there's barely any cars on the roads. Or you can say like, oh, you know, I'm just, you know, right around the block, no big deal, I'm so close.
Yeah.
Oh, I've driven this 1,000 times, no problem at all.
I've definitely heard that
Yeah.
kind of language from real people.
You ever
Yeah.
heard the line of like, oh, you know, actually I drive better a little bit drunk, you know, I'm more careful, you know, I'm more aware.
That's just bullshit. Who's
Not
saying
drunk,
that?
I'm just like autopilot mode, not really caring about, you know, just on autopilot. But oh, I've had a few beers in me, like I'm watching, I'm aware.
Yeah. I don't know who's saying that, but I would call bullshit to their face if they said something like that to me.
Nice.
I'm like, give me your keys right now. You saying
Never
that
thought.
has actually made me more suspicious of you, and I am taking your keys.
I'll put.
Oh, I do. I wanted to say just about that, the bar scene. I do like how the square dance bar is literally right next to like a diner that is apparently open 24 hours. I would love that. Go find that place in San Francisco for me. I want to go to.
You know what's sad though? Like, you know how like businesses close in general, but like in the Bay a lot.
Oh yeah.
There are like no places. It's like they're all gone. Like all old places no longer exist.
That's always been my impression of the Bay Area. It's all kind of new, soulless. Everyone who
I mean,
I
you'll
talk
see articles every once in a while of like, oh, this old establishment that's been here for decades is closing. So some
Yeah.
of them kind of are clawing on.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly they're gone.
Everyone who I've talked to, which is a handful now, of people who have lived in San Francisco or the Bay Area, kind of pre-tech for any amount of time, they always say the same thing, and it's the person I'm talking to is usually does not live there anymore. And they're always like, yeah, it's changed a lot. City's really different now. And they're always really bitter about it.
And they're like, this used to be and then they'll say like
Yeah.
something. There used to be fields here.
I wonder if that's like it's certainly like more pronounced in the Bay Area for obvious reasons, but I think most cities, you know, post internet probably experience something different like that. Just, you know, the makeup of like cities in America like changes like dramatically these days. Like people move, businesses open and close everywhere. Like even where we're from, I'm sure like the people are like, yeah, this town used to be really different like 20 years ago. Like it's worse now. I think that's just the trend. And I think it's just related to like people not staying in places very long and like the general transplant nature of tech. Not even like working in tech, but just like the way that people work remotely now and they can live anywhere. And so no one has roots anywhere. They just go wherever. All right, we're going to end today's show with us talking about what's keeping us happy this week, which may or may not be the name of another segment and another podcast. What's keeping you happy?
Well, I just finished The Sopranos on New Year's, actually.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, dude, that what an incredible television program.
Yes.
Completely lived up to its reputation. Was completely blown away by the entirety of it, but that finale, huh?
Justin talks about the finale in a fun way because
What's his take?
that show was partially responsible for establishing serialized television as like a mainstream medium. And so it's like when it's on in the 90s, it's like the most popular thing, you know, completely mainstream. Everybody watches The Sopranos. And then it ends like an art house movie is what Justin says, which is like the biggest like subversion of like TV expectations.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
every other show of that caliber and that notoriety in that same position would like give you something conclusive. It would do some.
I think it
fan
ended
service.
beautifully.
Oh yeah, I agree. I'm pro the ending.
I think that like something that a TV show like that could run into, a failing like a Yeah, something that can happen where it's not done very well with a TV show like that. You know, season per season, it's a show about the mafia. There's intrigue and plot lines about betrayal and revenge and whatnot. And after 7 seasons, it can kind of get repetitive. So, like, by the end of it, it ends on this whole drama of them going up against, like, that New York family. That Phil guy, the white-haired guy.
Yeah.
And the danger, I think, is ending a show as good as that on a plot line that ultimately is kind of trivial. Like, whether the Sopranos get back at the Phil family or the other way around is kind of like besides the point of the show as a whole. Like, it's bigger than any particular plot line about who wants to kill who at any given moment. So I like the fact that they kind of resolved that and ended the show on a very ambiguous, artsy note. I just think that it was the right way to do it.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. The show itself, I think, is, you know, on the surface, because this was always my impression, like looking at it from a distance before I watched it, was like, that's just an HBO show about the mafia. That's what that is. And that, like, sentence alone comes with its own set of expectations.
Right.
But it's really a show about this guy and some other guys, but like mainly Tony Soprano and his like introspective like journey into like understanding himself. It's you know, the tagline is, you know, mob boss goes to therapy. And it like the show is like surreal at times. Tony Soprano is like a sympathetic character while also being like a complete sociopath and like very inarguably evil. The show is like way smarter than just mafia, HBO mafia crime drama.
Yeah.
And so you're right. The only way to end a show like that is to not have like the mafia ending with like the big shootout.
The expected kind of ending. Yeah.
Yeah.
That last season was beautifully done. I mean, I think that the tone it struck was like exactly what it needed. It completely demonized Tony by the end. I mean, like, they really made a point of making him seem like a terrible person who I don't think benefited from therapy one iota.
I think the purpose of therapy in the show, at least according to the end, is, if I remember right, somehow a character, maybe it's the therapist herself, starts to learn about this theory about sociopaths, that therapy for a sociopath is actually counterintuitive because it teaches the sociopath in question how to better manipulate those around him. It makes them more aware of the ways in which they are a sociopath, and therefore helps them like blend into society and like perpetrate their sociopathic tendencies like more easily and without conscience. It's sort of this like, if I remember right, the therapist comes to this like revelation towards the end where she keeps coming back to Tony despite her knowing all of the evil things that she does, because she's on this crusade to help him. She believes that he can be saved with just enough therapy, and she in the end realizes that maybe she was actually just making him stronger, making him more evil, which I think is pretty cool and scary.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool takeaway. Yeah, there's this idea that like some men are resistant to talking about their feelings and to therapy in general, but Tony wasn't that at all. I mean, he did it. He did therapy for 6-7 years, but it never changed his behavior. I think he is a violent, aggressive person.
Yeah.
Kind of animalistic, and like he is so that to his core that therapy is not going to change it, it's not going to do anything to turn him into what you might consider a better person.
Yeah.
I don't think therapy has that power.
No,
Ultimately.
the doctor in the show, I think, thinks it does. But
Which
you're
all
right.
therapists do. I mean, no therapist thinks that like therapy doesn't have any efficacy or power.
Right. And it does have power, but like within limits. You know. And like really
Within limits. It wasn't going to change Tony, I don't think.
the power of therapy is sort of equal or opposite to the person participating in it. It's like you need to be willing to let it change you. So like therapy is just like a tool that a person uses to change themselves. But if you are unwilling or unable to change yourself, it will have no effect on you. And in Tony's case, he's either like, you know, whatever you want to say about like the psychology of criminal minds, which I'm no expert on that, but he's either like too traumatized by his past and simply can't get over it or change or experience the world any differently, or he's like some kind of weird biological killer, kind of like in Basic Instinct. Like there's just people who are that, they are evil, and there's not a lot you can do about it.
See, I don't think that's what Tony is. I don't think that he's evil. I don't think he's a psychopath or a sociopath or anything.
I think there's
Violence is so common historically. Like we live in a time and in a culture and a society that is weirdly nonviolent.
That's true. Yeah, historically.
But you don't have to go that far back in like Sopranos family history to a time and a place where the way he acts is like totally fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a weird person or abnormal to partake in that kind of thing. So I think he's like a totally normal guy who just happens to live in a culture of violence.
Well, I
And
think
so
like
what can you do about that? You can try to convince him to not do that anymore, but that's not that's not what therapy is for.
I think the show and therapy in general kind of calls into question like what normal even means, because yeah, 20 years ago in Tony Soprano's world that would be normal, but only if you accept like, you know, hyper violence and, you know, sort of a sociopathic relationship to death as normal. And like what's normal is just relative to like the time that you live in. And Tony is unique in that world because he's like the first guy, first boss, first mob member, whoever, to make an attempt at like understanding themselves more. Because certainly like all the guys who like preceded them would have no interest. They would be the person that you described where they were like resistant to talking about their feelings and like thinking that that was weak or counterintuitive. But Tony, he is like this weird, like sort of modern version of those guys where he's like, maybe there is some utility in like understanding myself better. And whatever his motivations may be for it, it ultimately like doesn't change anything. And I think that says more about him than anything else. It says that he's like just foundationally violent and has little regard for life, whether that's like him naturally or him like just so overly conditioned to be that way that therapy can't help him. It doesn't really matter which of those it is, but he's just like so interesting because he's like the first guy who's like, I'm gonna like try to understand why I am the way that I am. And if you accept like kind of what the text says in the end, it's because nothing changes because he is a sociopath, and like the therapy just helped him understand that he is a sociopath and basically just be okay with it.
There's a lot of interesting commentary on therapy in the show. Like, there's plenty of other therapists and kind of that field in the show. Like, his sister has one.
The therapist also goes to her own therapist. There's
The
like
therapist goes, yeah.
which is a probably an early example of that sort of weird cyclical incestuous nature of therapy, because therapy on paper is supposed to be this sort of objective sage environment where you go in and talk to a person who is in their own way like perfect and non-judgmental and unbiased, and is there to listen to your problems and give you unbiased feedback on them. But like, the truth is that therapists are just people, and they also have their own shit and have to go to other therapists. And so,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's simultaneously like fine that that's the way that it is, but in the show it does sort of, I don't know, it points out the weakness of the idealistic perception of therapy.
It does. It doesn't hold therapy up as a 100% good. It actually critiques therapy in a lot of places. The one that comes to mind right now is the sister's therapist. What's her name?
I don't remember this sister's therapist all that well.
You know the sister though.
The annoying one, right? With the
annoying sister
with the Rolling Stones tattoo.
Yeah. Like, she has a therapist that essentially just enables her. Like, she comes in with her problems, and the therapist is just like, "You go." Like, you like the sister has such a warped way of looking at things, and she brings that into therapy. The therapist doesn't know what like reality looks like, so she just takes what the sister gives her and tells her stuff to pump her up and puts her back out in the world.
Right.
The scene I'm thinking of is when she gets together with Bobby. His wife dies.
Yeah.
He's so broken up about it. Janice is very impressed by how emotional he's being about it. Has a therapy session and essentially decides that that's what I want in my life, so I'm just going to take this man and make him my own. There's also the son, AJ. He goes to a therapist in the final season, and it's not such an overt criticism, but like, that therapist, you could tell, is just like not helping. He's just like a way too stiff professional guy asking kind of surface level therapy questions, whatever they teach them to do at their schools.
Yeah.
What's that line from The Departed? They said, like, I think they're quoting something. It was like a voiceover, but something about the Irish being the only people who are completely immune to psychotherapy.
Yeah, that's right. The main love interest in that is the therapist.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Love it.
And that's another good, like, kind of nice critique on therapy, that movie, because she is like a very fallible person in that movie. The therapist character, she like cheats on her boyfriend. And she's
duped the whole time.
She's what?
Does she dupe? Oh, that's right. Cheats on
Matt Damon.
Well, she's duped by Matt Damon.
She's duped by Matt Damon, and then ultimately is unfaithful to Matt Damon, but under the guise of like a pretty straightforward relationship. Yeah, she's just like a regular person. And there's like a part where Leo comes into her office and is like basically demanding drugs to like calm him down from like panic attacks.
Right.
Because the situation he's in is like so stressful that it's literally driving him crazy. And he's like, I need you to give me drugs. Just kind of straight up. He's like, I need a prescription to whatever. She's like, I can't give that to you because XYZ, like, it's unethical, whatever. And he's basically like, fuck you. You're forcing me to go out onto the street and like buy drugs illegally now. Like, fuck you. And he storms out. And then she like follows after him like rom-com style and like hands him a prescription like outside the building. And so yeah, like, she was just like, whatever kind of professional standards that she was held to there, she was like convinced emotionally to do something like against her her ethics, her professional ethics. So just a regular person, not someone who can fix all your problems.
So that's what's keeping me happy.
Therapy. What's keeping me happy is a different podcast from our own. It's another movie podcast. I actually reached out to this podcast on Instagram. I just like sent them a DM strictly to say that I liked their podcast.
Ah, nice.
And they're like pretty popular. I think they're pretty young still, but have popped off. It's called What Went Wrong. You should look it up. It's very good.
I will.
It's similar to Blank Check in that it's basically a retelling of the production that led up to a movie, and it's all the hits. Like all of their episodes, if you just look at them, it's all stuff that like any person who's nostalgic about movies has seen. But theirs, unlike Blank Check, is much more structured. They alternate on some kind of schedule where one person does all of the research for how a movie was made, and their research methods include watching documentaries, listening to directors' commentaries, reading entire books. It's extensive, and so they have like a lot of data to get through when they present their case. It's just like one of the hosts presenting said data to the other one, and the other one doesn't know anything, which is a fun way to move through that information. But it's very structured. It's definitely like written out, like outlined to a degree. But the two hosts have like a really good rapport despite that. It's not boring, it's not pretentious, and it's not annoying like Blank Check can sometimes be. So I said as much in that DM where I was just like, you guys have a very good, simple thesis to your podcast, and you execute it very well, very competently.
Nice.
It's like
Did you mention that you also host a podcast?
I did. Yeah, I messaged them with the Film Hole account.
Nice. So it's coming from like a fellow podcaster, not just like a random fan.
And I was like, I didn't make
more meaningful that way.
I didn't make too many comparisons. I was just like, our podcast is very bare bones, very small compared to yours, but like said that their podcast was inspiring. On
a related story I have is that I also reached out to a podcast recently.
Oh, really?
It was this new kind of, it was for the book I was reading, Gravity's Rainbow, and these like people put out this like really great, well-produced podcast that had like nice guests, like professors and stuff on. And then, I just like gave them a shout out on Reddit and complained because they put a spoiler in one of the episodes. But it was mostly positive. I was like,
did you complain in like sort of an endearing way?
I was like, I didn't need to know that character died later in the book. Because like in the discussion, like one of them was just like momentarily just gave up on like not having spoilers. He's like, oh, just whatever. I mean, this is a spoiler, but like, he dies.
Gave you like no chance to like shut the podcast off.
None. He's like, he dies, comes back as a ghost later. No big deal. I'm like, okay, didn't need to know that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I understand it may be hard to keep spoilers out of something you've already read before, but if you're just jumping to the end.
Yeah, nice. Did they write back at all?
Yeah, they apologized for the spoiler.
Nice. That's like the one nice thing about social media is the ability to communicate with people you admire who are far above you in like social circles.
And maybe my niche tastes lend themselves to this, but it seems like a much smaller world than you might expect with some content creators. Like it's not such a big thing that your voice as an individual is completely insignificant.
I think that the
internet has made this happen.
Yes, I also think there's a lot to be said about just not being noise on someone's when you're reaching out to any sort of entity. That like there's plenty of ways where you can just be like another comment, but like what you did, and I feel like kind of what I did, is like I'm gonna write these people like a well thought out note, and whether or not that garners any response, that's just how I am. I'm not a person who just comments randomly on posts. Like I'm going to craft something that I hope someone would read. And I think living like that will often get you noticed because
Right.
people care.
I think about it just like if I was writing an email to them. Like there's been times throughout my academic career where you just have to cold email people, and they may be more reputable or whatever. You're asking them for something, but there's a way to just write an email that's respectful and to the point.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of like where you have an ask, even if that ask is just like notice me and respond back and acknowledge.
Right.
A little bit of dialogue.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I think I do well. Think you do well too. Is I can like craft the hell out of a message, like a single message that will have like structure and talking points and communicate something sincere at the end. That I don't know, I feel like that's a really valuable skill that I have and that other people should have. You have it too.
It's a skill you pick up.
Yeah. Just communicating clearly in any way is nice. So that's what's keeping me happy is that really cool podcast, What Went Wrong. Feel free to have me as a guest, or both of us as a guest on your podcast and talk about movie podcasts sometimes.
Hey.
Thanks for listening. Film Hole is produced by just us, myself and Raul. Our music is by Double U, that's underscore the word double and 2 U's. Get Film Hole wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like it, rate it. If you hate it, maybe don't. Thanks again. See you next time.